Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this morning's edition of our lecture series. As I talked this morning about the near absence of war, near total absence of war in Omenana, I'll explain. The Igbo religion, which is the Israelite religion, does not include a tendency to wage any kind of war. It includes a tendency to engage in self-defense if the enemies come upon you. But were the Israelites, were the Igbos to go on wars of expansion, wars of offense? No. This is reflected in the fact that the Igbo people, who are the largest ethnic group in Nigeria, in the territory that the British created and called Nigeria, did not engage in building kingdoms or expand and ultimately became empires. The Igbos did no such thing. They started off as Hebrew families, and that is what they are still today. Nigeria has over 200 kingdoms. None of them is Igbo. Of course, you would find Igbos today in confusion, lying that their families were ancient kingdoms. But none of those ancient kingdoms, quote, had a palace, had prisons, had armies, and none of them had any king who controlled the land and controlled the people. Everybody was equal. Even the Igbos claiming that they had ancient kingdoms know that in their domains, in their families, obodo is the Igbo word for family in the sense of clan or republic. They know that in this obodo, everybody had a right to an opinion and a vote and a voice. But in order to be like other Nigerians, you begin to find the Igbos in confusion, claiming that these families were ancient kingdoms. Meanwhile, you are never ever going to find a Hausa, Fulani, or Yoruba, or Bini claiming that their kingdoms and empires, which were real, some of them had eunuchs, were ancient, so you could see the dissonance. As I was getting into this, explaining that the Omenana contained zero elements of aggressiveness. A Jewish woman, I suppose she could be Ashkenazi or Sephardi, most likely Ashkenazi, very interestingly and positively contributed to the discourse. Her name, by the way, is Naomi Kaufman Baum. She wrote, Remi Ilona, recently I learned that a war of defense may be proclaimed by an Israelite king. But for a war of expansion, he cannot declare a war without the permission of the Sanhedrin, Council of Sages. This tells us a lot about the ethics of Israelite kingship and society. Born contributed positively in many ways. She did not exclude the Israelites by not using the term Israelites. If she had used any other term beside Israelite and Hebrew, she would have excluded me. So I'm happy she used the term Israelite, because that includes me and includes my culture and narratives in the discussion. I found what she wrote very interesting, and I decided to make something more out of it. Who constituted this Sanhedrin? We would find the answers by looking at the structure of the Igbo society. The people who ran the Igbo societies I talked about it recently, the elders, the chief priests of the various communities, of the various families, a person called Zenri, and his brothers who were called Umunri. I will explain, and I will relate this to the source, the origins of what I just explained. The 70 elders of Israel, led by Moses, sat before the Lord, ate, and did not die. The elders were always number one in Israel. And when you look at it in terms of the children of Jacob, Reuben was number one. He was the priest until, due to his weakness, God took that position from him and it devolved. God gave it to Aaron and the Levites because they showed a lot of faithfulness in living by the traditions. But this did not mean that Reuben's position was completely taken away. He may have stopped serving as the priest, but all the children of Israel recognized that he was the first to come out. The position of firstborn son was not taken away from him. It remained in the Bible. The elders, the chief priests of the various communities among the Igbos, every family had a priest called a Zana or Ezemo. These were the people who played the roles that the Reubenites were playing before the Aaronites and the Levites were used to replace them in the service of the people and God as priests of the community. I mentioned a person called Zenri. Who were the Nri? Or who are the Nri? They are the Levites of the Igbos. Their priest was called the Zenri. The priest of those Levitical communities was called the Zenri. His brothers and sisters were called Umu Unri. Then there was another class. I'm not sure they sat in the Sanhedrin, but they were there in the sanctuaries in Israel alongside all these other peoples that worked as priests. The Osu, in the Gemara recognized them as Netinim. These were the people whom one thing or the other, whom circumstances drove into the sanctuaries in Israel for safety, and they served under the priests. The first time the Torah recognized them, the first time the Bible of Israel recognized them, was when the Gibeonites, in fear for their lives, they did not want to wage war against Israel, so they deceived the Israelite champion Joshua, told him that they came from a very far country. And Joshua swore an oath that Israel would not fight them. When Joshua eventually discovered that they were not from a far country, but we are from nearby, Joshua said, "Henceforth, in the house of my God, you shall be hewers of wood and drawers of water." This is what the Osu did in the houses of public worship in Igbo land. We encountered people like Osu again when that intrepid Israelite general, Joab, the nephew of King David, wanted to escape from Solomon. He ran into the temple or into the sanctuary and caught hold of the horns of the altar. But Solomon ordered him out of there. You know why? Israelite law guaranteed total safety to any Hebrew who ran into the sanctuary. He became a word of God, but in order to protect him or to protect her, God gave them a position alongside the priests so that they will have total protection, because Israel was a kingdom of priests. Israel was the nation of God. So the people who served God publicly in this egalitarian society, they had some, you know. So the Osu, who in other societies became the lowest of the low, became one of the elites in Israel. I've had some very funny characters saying that the Hebrews, the Israelites, must have learned Israelite traditions from the missionaries. God's sake. There are sections of Israelite traditions that only the Igbos know. I do not know that community of Israel existing in the world today that will understand the culture, the traditions, the customs that relate to the Osu. And if you want to read about the Osu in sources that are nearly a century, so that you will not, in confusion, begin to think that Remy Ilona made it up, you can board a flight if you are in America, board a flight if you are in the UK, or if you are not Igbo. Because no Igbo, even an insane one, would say that they don't know about the Osu, or who is not, or who is an Osu, or that Osu is an invention. But if you want to read about it, go to Things Fall Apart. Go to No Longer at Ease. Ashebe wrote about them nearly 100 years ago. They were those Israelites who sought shelter in the house of God, that the Talmud, the Gemara, recognized as Netinim. So, people have wondered, why am I giving prominence to all this? Why have I devoted my life to all this? And I say, had the Igbo people been aware of all this, the Igbo people would have avoided several disasters. They would not have been the most enslaved group of Africans during the transatlantic slave trade. The coast bordering Igbo land was called the Slave Coast. On a nation-to-nation basis, Igbos were the most enslaved. They suffered more than any other group during the 300 years of the transatlantic slave trade. Had Igbos known about all this, Igbos would have remembered, not known, they knew. They would have remembered Deuteronomy 28, which warned Israel, be thou holy. Purify yourself, purge thyself, cleanse thyself. And Igbos would have avoided the other tragedies that fell on the Igbos. Nigeria is a country of over 300 nations. Only the Igbos have suffered genocide, and they were innocent of the charges leveled against them for the genocide, but they had already been discommunicated, been disconnected from the grace of the Lord Chukwu, who protected, who protects, who is the person, the being that alone could protect them. This morning, I wondered why Igbos are afraid to say we are Israelites. I posed this question to, among others, a young man. From his photographs, he could be younger than myself, Angelo Nebu. Why are you guys not boldly, proudly stating who you are? Why are you not calling the unique persecution you go through anti-Semitism? Ladies and gentlemen, followers of this channel, subscribe, hit the subscribe button, share these videos. In them lie the information that would heal not only the Igbos, but all the peoples that are connected to them. Thank you. Have a good week.